Let's go. Ayan na. Kamusta kayo dyan, mga kameta? Talagang ito ang bilis talaga ng panahon. Ang bilis talaga ng panahon, mga kameta. Isang taon na pala since yung makasaysayan na araw na kahit si Ariana Grande ay napatweet, di ba? Pati si Ariana Grande, yung mga global celebrities din nakapansin nito. Of course, exactly a year ago, ito po yung March 20, no? If I'm not mistaken, March 20, 2022. May pagka Zalora, may pagka Shopee, 20, puro mga 222. Ito sa March 20, 2022, mga kameta, ito yun eh. Ito yung araw na makasaysayan na araw na kung saan nakita natin nagdagsaan ng mga supporters ng dating Vice President Leni Robredo. And shall I put it this way? Well, officially, the first runner-up doon sa elections 2022. Of course, yung mga super supporters ng dating Vice President natin at of course, yung mga critics ng kasalukuyan na presidente, they're kind of returning the favor also by questioning results of elections. So nakita natin since last week, mga kameta, nagre-resurface ito yung mga allegations. Ito let me be very clear. Ito yung mga allegations na may mga anomalya, allegedly may anomalya or allegedly may mga discrepancies dun sa source code or logs ukol dun sa counting process ng votes. So some of the supporters, at least some of the supporters of the previous vice president have been questioning whether talaga siya yung natalo. And perhaps I would say one big reason, aside from the fact that marami, of course, meron trust issues sa ating sistema, like surprise, the other reason that my sense is marami sa ating mga kababayan at marami sa mga supporters ni Ma'am Leni Robredo, VP Leni Robredo, isang malaking dahilan na siguro hindi sila naniwala na natalo talaga siya is because of the unprecedented number of people coming out. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, mga kameta. No? So, siguro, the last time we saw anything like this, hindi po ito yung mga rally ni Tatay Digong. Yung mga rally ni Tatay Digong, kahit yung meeting de avance niya, parang hindi kasing laki na ito eh. I mean, I think the numbers suggest that ibang level po yung numbers na nag-attend. Hindi lang dito, no, sa Pasig is Pink, pero dun sa mga ibang rallies, not to mention yung meeting de avance ni Leni Robredo nung 2022 elections. Of course, tayo po bilang isang vlogger, bilang isang analyst, pumunta tayo sa iba't ibang meeting de avance. Hindi lang kay Leni Robredo, pinuntahan ko rin yung kay Uniting, kay Sara Duterte, and also kay Bongbong Marcos, of course, to be able to get a proper view of things, to be able to, more objectively analyze what was going on. So, kita niyo naman, I try to be as objective as possible, at makita niyo naman, I always talk about the merits and demerits of each side. Although, of course, I never buy into false equivalence. So going back to this, mga kameta, based on our own personal observation, based dun sa mga aerial view, aerial shot, drone shot, based dun sa mga yung trending online on Twitter, based dun sa mga commentaries, based even dun sa mga numbers, and some would even say deflated numbers na lumabas from yung authorities, Philippine National Police. We're talking about huge number of people. May pagka million strong feel yung mga rallies ni Leni Robredo. And as I say, dito mo talaga ma-realize ang bilis ng panahon, mga kameta. 1 year na pala since that special day. And of course, we know that after that day, sunod, no, every weekend or every week at least, we have this huge statements of support by Leni Robredo's partisans, if I can put it that way. And hindi lang sa Metro Manila, mga kameta, sa iba't ibang panig ng hindi lang Pilipinas, pati sa mundo, no? Nakita natin na maraming mga supporters ni Leni Robredo ay lumalabas at nagpapakita ng support sa kanya. So I just want to go back to this, mga kameta, because marami sa atin, unfortunately, may tendency na hindi naman makalimot, pero how should I put it? Ganito na lang. Okay, so ito yung hypothesis ko. I won't say theoria. Of course, yung isang dahilan na siguro yung iba, isang dahilan is because, sa aking palagay, marami sa atin, tinatrato ang demokrasya essentially as, democracy is when there's elections. So, ang tendency po ng karamihan ng ating mga kababayan is magiging super active or relatively more active nung panahon ng elections, because we kind of we kind of, we kind of create this one-to-one correspondence between democracy and elections. No, so isang dahilan is because we treat democratic politics in a cyclical manner. The other reason, of course, is, let's be honest, sobrang toxic na yung politika natin over the past few years, especially. I mean, let's just be brutally honest about it, especially since nanalo si dating Pangulong Digong noong 2016, ibang klase na yung mga politika natin. I can say personally, grabe yung mga trolling na ginawa sa atin, grabe, may mga death threats, may mga kabastusan kung anong ginawa sa atin. Pero of course, tayo naman, alam mo naman, mga kafuego, hindi tayo magpapano sa mga ano na yan, diba? Mga respect my opinion na lang tayo, right? So, mga kameta, alam natin napaka-toxic. So, the other tendency is that when people are plugged in sa ating politika but very temporarily because yung tolerance level po ay hindi pa rin nandyan, di ba? So, syempre, yung mga katulad natin, yung mga kafuego natin dyan, medyo matigas ang ulo, medyo matapang, kayang-kaya. Yung iba nga sa atin, binabanat pa yung mga nagbabash. So, ako, personally, I enjoy bashing the bashers kasi alam naman natin yung mga bashers na yun, mga, alam mo naman, di ba? Karamihan mga yan. Ayoko na i-bash yung mga yan. Alam nyo na, tingnan nyo lang profile picture pa lang parang, kuya, te, parang, te, parang gusto mo lang ganun, te. Assuming totoong tao pa. Anyway, mga kameta, so, naiintindihan ako. So, number one reason is, many of our people tend to treat politics, treat democratic politics in a cyclical manner. So, only during elections, especially presidential elections, every 6 years, doon lang natin nakikita na next level ng tao. And of course, we had the two EDSAs, no? You can also count EDSA Tres, no? Although different socioeconomic class and background. The second reason, mga kameta, is because super polarized yung politics natin. So marami sa ating mga kababayan, as I said, they're plugged in but very temporarily because yun nga, nakaka-stress, di ba? Mahirap na nga ang buhay. Mahirap na ang daming drama sa buhay, ang daming tapos ito pa, kailangan ko pa kausapin si OG Diaz, kailangan ko pa, mayroon pang drama si Liza, mayroon pa, maraming drama sa buhay, di ba? So kung maraming drama sa buhay, of course, syempre, yung energy mo, limitado lang. Kailangan mo magtrabaho, kailangan mo kumita, kailangan mong yung mga marites, yung mga yung mga katrabaho mo. So, sa daming stress sa buhay, marami sa atin sinasabi na, well, there's just so much I can take. So, the tendencies we have transitional or transient, no? Transient activism. But the third reason, mga kameta, sa aking palagay, na maraming hindi naka-move on dun sa resulta ng last elections is because, mga kameta, lalong-lalo na yung mga nakakita, whether in person, whether through social media or katulad natin both, no? Nakita nila, grabe, ang daming tao lumabas. Tignan mo naman yung mga pictures, mga kameta, hindi ito yung mga katulad ng mga, alam mo, mga unity, mga respect my onion type. Hindi ito mga onion, hindi ito mga sibuyas, hindi ito mga yayamanin na red sibuyas, di ba? It is not the red sibuyas, it is the mamaya tayo you get what I'm saying? So I think marami sa atin na nakikita nito, yung maraming tao na nagdagsaan sa roads, nagdagsaan sa mga boulevards, filled up whole boulevards, right? It's so impressive, at least visually, that this caught the attention of the world. Ariana Grande joined the chat room, di ba? So I think that's also one big reason sa mga kameta na marami hindi naniwala na bakit nanalo yung kabila tapos ang laki pa ng agwat, di ba? Halos doble, no? So Leni Robredo, 25-30%, between 25-30%, and then yung isa almost 60%, di ba? So marami sa ating mga kameta, including mga kameta, hindi naniwala sa resulta kasi sinabi niya, bakit wala naman ganun si BBM, di ba? Or wala naman ganun si Sara, di ba? Bakit nanalo sila ng ganyang kalaki pa ng agwat, di ba? So some would say the entire results are, again, these are allegations. Some would say the entire results are fabricated. Some would say that maybe natalo pero it should have been much closer, etc., etc. So there are a lot of theories about that. So, mga kameta, ako naman ang stance ko is like this. First of all, of course, yung number of voters po natin ay what? At least eligible voters natin ay lampas sa 50 million. So, even if 1, 2, 3, even 5 million coming out throughout the months, that doesn't necessarily suggest that, 50 million are with Leni or 30 or 40 million with Leni. I'm just trying to, approach this in a scientific way, right? So, you could argue that this was just the tip of the iceberg, or some would say this is probably already half or 20% or 10% of the total support. So kung 1 million or 2 million lumabas and then 15 million total vote ni Lenny, baka hindi totally unreasonable. That's one argument, no? Obviously, as I said, the counter argument would be this was just the tip of the iceberg. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Eh, yung kabila nga, ba't yung tip ng iceberg nila? You know, ang liit, parang ganon yung argument, di ba? Again, I'm just laying out the argument there. No, but what I'm saying is that, you know, these are parang the idea of 1-2 million coming on the street and then getting 15 million in total might not be totally out of this world also. I'm just saying, right? Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind is the surveys we're suggesting, and I'm talking about different kinds of surveys, not one survey, not two surveys, but different kinds of surveys, including surveys attached to very reputable agencies, reputable experts groups, people that kilala natin, na malapit sa ating puso, na kilala natin, colleagues natin, napakagaling na political scientists, statisticians. Well, they were also suggesting that, well, the actual numbers of the vote, you know, turnout for a specific person will be quite different from the enthusiasm we're seeing here, you know. So flash in the pan, kumbaga, could be the counter argument again, or like the froth on top of the, you know. So that was the other thing that we're looking at. But there's a third thing, mga kameta, that I want to emphasize here. Again, please, you know, don't shoot the messenger, wag kayo magalit. The other thing we have to keep in mind, mga kameta, is that there was actually a difference in strategy of Leni Robredo and strategy of Bongbong Marcos when it came to rallying support. So, yung style nila ng camp ni Leni Robredo, the strategy was ask your supporters to concentrate in certain area and send a very strong signal or very strong visuals. While kung pansin nyo, si BBM mas mahilig sa motorcade. So, ang ginagawa ng campaign nila BBM was not to concentrate all of their supporters in a certain area, but actually motorcade through different provinces, etc. So, ang maging counter-argument na kabila is, you would think that konting support kay Bongbong Marcos because it's very well dispersed along the roads, along the, you know, mga iba't ibang panig ng ating bansa na motorcade ni BBM. So, in short, you could say one has a more horizontal approach, one has a vertical approach. So, horizontal in the sense that spread thin yung kay BBM, going through motorcade different areas, while yung kay Lenny is concentrated, so suddenly you have this very, very impressive visual. This is the other thing that we have to keep in mind. The number 4 thing we have to keep in mind, mga kameta, is, well, the support that came out for Lenny in a lot of these big cities tend to be the middle class of the Philippines. And we know the middle class in general is a minority. And then some numbers suggest that just a plurality or barely a majority of the middle classes actually sided with the opposition against the unity team, etc. Now, so again, I'm not making a final judgment here. I'm just trying to help you guys understand yung lay of the land, no? And how statistically speaking, the way things turned out based on the final results may not be totally crazy or out of this world. But nonetheless, of course, mga kameta, we need full transparency pagdating dun sa counting process, etc. At katulad ng pinag-usapan natin, mga kameta, last meeting, ito yung pinag-usapan natin last meeting, mga kameta, para sa akin, as much as we have to pay attention to downstream, meaning the vote count part, we also have to pay attention to the upstream, meaning yung mga allegations ng vote buying, meaning cheating that happened before the vote was even casted. And we know there's a lot of, well, at least allegations on that front, and there are a lot of groups who are saying that actually a lot of vote buying happened. So you could question the entire integrity of elections from that point of view alone, even without going to the technicalities of the vote count, source code, logins, etc. All of this criticism that is coming from former ICT secretary and former AFP deputy chief General Rio Jr., for instance. So, I'm just trying to give you the lay of the land because ayaw natin maging, you know, I don't want to give just a biased partisan point of view. I'm just trying to show you guys what are the arguments and counter arguments here. But, again, as I said, politics is an emotional thing. Politics is a visual thing. Politics is a question of heart. Politics is a question of conviction. It's a question of aspiration and hope. So kung ikaw ay nakapunta sa mga ganitong events and when you saw so many people so passionate and enthusiastic, it's very understandable na your expectation would be very high. In the same way, if the expectation very, very high and then the final official results were something na hindi tugma dyan, I can also understand while marami sa ating mga kababayan ay very disappointed. Yung marami dyan nadidepress, yung iba almost parang PTSD level na, di ba? Na hindi nakakatulong, may palpitation, nasa stress. So, yung iba nag-denial mode, nag-phases of grief, etc. So, again, I understand it. And I understand it again because of this particular backdrop of this particular context. Yun po yung pinag-usapan natin mga kameta. But nonetheless, what I really want to talk about mga kameta, wag na yun sila Robin Hood and all. Next time na yan, parang magulo na masyado kung papasukin ko pa si Robin Hood, mga etc. Mamaya na yan, kasi nagdadrama rin sila na mag-resign siya sa PDP Laban. Ilan na ba yung faction sa PDP Laban? Magfa-faction pa na naman ulit kung hindi daw nagkaroon ng constitutional change, etc. Pag-usapan ko yun separately. I don't want to muddy the waters. Mamaya natin pag-usapan itong mga constitutional experts natin, no? Special C, of course, ano. No. Let me go to this mga kameta because what I want to talk about is this. Remember yung argument ko nung panahon na yan. My argument back during the election was even if hindi manalo si LENI, even if let's say, okay, even if legitimately tanggap nyo na hindi siya nanalo, alright? Or tanggap nyo na hindi siya legitimately nanalo, okay, baliktaran natin. The point is, my big win si LENI sa election na yan because she was able to mobilize so many people, not for an EDSA revolution 1, for an EDSA revolution 2, but for an election. Just a number of people coming out, the sheer enthusiasm, the commitment, the conviction, the people would go door to door, the activism, the size of the campaign, the level of voluntarism. This is almost unprecedented. We have not seen anything like that in a very long time. No, at least as far as progressive, liberal, opposition, leaders and a campaign is concerned. No, so in spite of lack of budget, lack of support, in spite of all of the attacks on Leni Robredo from not one but two camps, if not three camps at some point, si Tatay, si Isko, si BBM, lahat yung mga different yung mga camps nila, di ba, they were all converging around against her. Nakiuso pa yung mga ibang candidates at some point, but gladly at least hindi sumama si Manny Pacquiao doon. So kudos to Senator Pacquiao that at least hindi siya you know what I'm saying? So my point is to be able to mobilize that kind of enthusiasm against the grain of 6 years of authoritarian populism, against the grain of a lot of negativity and toxicity and all. Even worse, no? That in itself was a victory. But as I said, mga kameta, that's why binabalikan ko tong issue na ito because as I argued mga kameta, as I argued repeatedly, even after the election over and over again, it is important to sustain momentum. The word is sustain mga kameta. It's one thing to generate enthusiasm, but for enthusiasm to be translated into political capital, kailangan mo ng isang kilusan, no? Yun po ang challenge parate. And yun yung argument natin repeatedly last year mga kameta. Sinasabi natin yan, di ba? Dun sa mga article natin na LENI and the future of the pink movement. Basahin nyo ulit. Ang dami nag-share yan. I think like, siguro million ang views na to. 23,000 share. Like I wrote, I think three columns along these lines on how the opposition can still be a winner regardless of what happens in these elections. So I've been writing about this, and I've also said na the Philippines can always replicate the progressive victory in Latin America if certain mobilization tactics, certain charismatic leadership projection, and charismatic leadership enlistment would come into picture. Yun yung parati natin sinasabi mga kameta. Anyway, going back to this, ang argument natin is sana mga kameta, what we have is a country kung saan hindi lang may paki ang tao during elections period lang. At hindi lang may paki ang tao kung nanalo lang yung kanilang kandidato. Even worse, we have a situation sometimes, nanalo na ang kandidato nila tapos nag-switch off na sila sa politics. In fact, in many ways, yun ang, di ba, yun ang parang sinabi ni BBM na, kami nang bahala, pwede na kayo umuwi. Parang halos ganun yung sinabi niya dun sa inauguration speech niya, di ba? But that's wrong. That's not how democracy works. Democracy is about active citizenship. It is about participatory politics. No, you have to participate. And democracy is not about elections alone. It's exactly what happens after the ballot is cast. You make sure na the election had integrity. You make sure you challenge if walang integrity of elections. You make sure na kung nanalong candidate mo, you push your candidate to really fulfill his or her promises. Kung nanalo naman yung kabila, yung kalaban, or someone na you believe is a threat to democracy, or threat to your values, or a threat to our economy, our foreign policy, then you also have to mobilize for that. At yun po yung parati natin napansin, no? Na medyo kapos tayo pagdating sa gano'n. So we're good in generating enthusiasm. We're good in generating at least a semblance of movement. But we know very well, mga kameta, if you want to create isang kilusan talaga para sa pagbabago, a progressive movement, which is what allowed America to go from super trapo populism of the late 19th century to relative democratic activism and progressivism of early 20th century. So I can give you examples from all around the world. Sabi nga nila, di ba, you won't have change unless you struggle for it. And struggle is not just a matter of 1 month, 2 months, 1 week, one big rally. No, it's a matter of sustaining it over months, over years, and sometimes decades. No, that's how you get real change, transformational change. Hindi lang yung feel-good moment, hindi lang yung pa-cute moment, hindi lang yung that day of amazing day, picture, selfie, and then forget about it after 6 months, 1 year. So, pinabalikan ko yung mga kameta because as I said, the challenge here is how to turn that moment of enthusiasm into an actual movement for progressive reform. So, the jury is still out. Some would say para medyo kapos in terms of sustaining this momentum. But the other side of the argument would say this: pag malapit ng 2025 elections, expect the mobilization will happen. Not perhaps in 2025 per se, but expect it perhaps middle of next year. Expected by 2024, there'll be moves made, especially if Leni Robredo decides to run for Senate. And alam natin, based on all of the preliminary surveys out there, mga kameta, ang laki ng chance ni Leni Robredo to become a senator. And should she top the race or emerge among top 3 or top 5 in the Senate race for 2025, who knows? It could be anyone's game by 2028. Ngayon pa lang, si Sara Duterte, some people are wondering if she still has the same relevance or still has the same kind of political momentum. There is the Tulfo factor here, which could really muddy the water for that camp. And that could create a lot of new space, including for Leni Robredo. But the point is, if that is the strategy, if that were the strategy, rather, of course, there's a risk. Again, the risk is that you are perpetuating this cyclical approach to democracy. At the same time, some would say, let's just be practical and work with what we got. It's not like those people who showed up dun sa mga boulevards na yan, sa the million-strong shows na yan, ay biglang nawala ng pag-asa lahat or nawala ng enthusiasm. A lot of them still have a lot of residue or more than a residue of love and enthusiasm, not only for Leni, but what Leni stands for and people similar to Leni. So the idea is that baka even in 2024 ulit, immobilize yung voters and all, you can imagine these people coming out. But of course, you know where I stand. For me, sustaining momentum is very important in different ways. Now, I heard that one argument is that yung Angat Buhay organization in LENI, it's one way of keeping at least the spirit of solidarity and progressive commitment. But my sense is it has to go more than that. There has to be like really chapters made, really organizations made, really a lot of grassroots movements made, which is made up of these very people who showed up that day. Warm bodies on the street, showing their support, not once, not twice, but multiple times. At least 15 million people voted for Leni in under very difficult circumstances, in a very, very difficult field. Leni was not against one person, she was against two. Right? It was Sara and BBM combined. Very, very difficult circumstances. No? And yet, she was able to bring all of these people. So for me, I think this is going to be the debate right now. Are we going to wait until 2024 to see whether this was just a transient thing or there's more to it? Or some would say, maybe there's already something happening, you're just not appreciating. Or others would say, mukhang that was just a flash in the pan. Mukhang malabo na magkakaroon ng ganitong enthusiasm again. But I don't know. I think the jury's still out. I think Leni still has a lot of base, a lot of support. And I think if she learned the right lessons from the last elections, and if she runs for the Senate and tops the race or emerges amongst the top 3 or 5, we might see a 2.0 version of this. But all I'm saying is that, for a democracy to be a real democracy, you need to have a strong opposition. And when it comes to having a strong opposition, it cannot just be near every elections or just during election period, right? It has to be through and through. And para sa akin, this or semi-movement that emerged last year, this showed us the potential of what we could have in our democracy. Not necessarily for opposition or progressive movement, but in general. Because yun talagang kulang sa atin, mga kameta. Kasi kung pumunta ka sa ibang bansa, whether mga Alemania, Sweden, even America, in a lot of in Korea, South Korea, for instance, in Taiwan, and Hong Kong, even to a certain degree, in a lot of these places where you have had long decades of democratic struggle, very passionate commitment. I was in Hong Kong when there were protests in 2019. The hundreds of thousands of people were there. People coming out every week, over and over again. Since 2014, they were constant until, of course, the hammer came down from Beijing. And Hong Kong is not a democracy. It's just a city-state under control of China. It's a different story. But if you go to Taiwan, if you go to Korea, if you go to Scandinavian countries, you go to Europe, you go to Latin America, you can see that what we saw that day, 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago in Pasig, you will see that happening over and over and over again every few months, every year, multiple times, for commemoration of something important, for resisting the populist or authoritarianism. Look at, Lula supporters against, mobilizing against Bolsonaro, former president of Brazil, before even Lula coming back and winning the elections as he did last year. Because that was important. If you sustain the movement and the movement is there, then that movement can carry you come election day. Because one risk is that if you try to mobilize again during election day, baka medyo late na kasi lampas na ng 2 years. And by this time, the other side has already dipped its claws into the political soil. No? So yun po yung mga pinag-usapan natin. Anyway, have you noticed, I'm not making a final argument because I'm trying to keep an open mind and not to come off as someone who's just saying, oh, ito yung mali, ito yung tama. No, I'm just saying there's a lot of potential here, but potential is just potential unless it's realized. And to realize it, you have to sustain it. And sustaining that potential is extremely important to having a competitive, lively democracy, and also carrying the torch, carrying the baton for democratic struggle and reform in the country. Anyway, thank you very much mga kameta, kay Riz Ani, salamat, kay Jacinto, kay Annabel Gamoras, Catherine Palmeras, Samon Tanyes, thank you very much. Kay Edna De Villa, thank you very much also for joining us. Kay Ma'am Eden Olona, as always, also joining us, supporting us. Kay Noemi Tablada, as always, supporting us. Marami po yung sumusuporta sa atin. I always appreciate it. I can see mataas na engagement natin ngayon on this topic because I can see many people have strong feelings about it. Even if the enthusiasm level has kind of faded and it's not the same as yesterday. Pero parang ano yun eh. Char, parang first love, Char. Baka pwedeng bumalik, di ba? Old flame. Baka may pagka-old flame ito. Tingnan natin. Huwag naman sana super old flame na, di ba? Huwag hintayin hanggang 2028. Alright. Maraming salamat din dito sa mga supporters natin sa kabila. Ayan, dami natin mga supporters kay Claudio. Ayan, daming comment na to. Mamaya tayo magdebate. Ayan, buenos dias kay Salvatore, thank you. Oy gozaimasu sa Ayuma. Thank you very much kay Raimundo Jimenez, kay Ando. Ayan. Oh, by the way, grabe nag-viral yung natin yung interview natin kay OG. Hindi yung original gangster, OG as in OG Diaz, no? Medyo parang weird nga mas nag-viral siya dito, mga kameta. Dito sa YouTube channel natin kaysa dyan sa Facebook, which is weird because our following is way bigger there on Facebook than in YouTube. But yan, 120,000 views na po tayo dyan. I think this is among my highest sa YouTube. Of course, dito sa Facebook, naka-millions views na tayo for some of our videos. So anyway, mga kameta, check nyo rin yung kay OG Diaz. And please also continue to support yung podcast natin, the Richard Haydaran Podcast, para naman ganado tayo to continue to upload and all. Oh, by the way, magpo-post na rin tayo ng mga kameta, mga QR code natin. Sabi ko nga, di ba, we're hoping sana, God willing, we'll push ahead with doing more studio interviews and all. By the way, magkakaroon na tayo, God willing, ng stint more formally, again, in mainstream media. But that will be a different thing. That will be more about geopolitics. But I want to do more interviews like yung ginawa natin with OG Diaz. Talk to people in the showbiz industry. Talk to sports people. Something that's more out of what I do in mainstream media. And God willing, I'll be doing more in the mainstream media. We want to do that. So I really appreciate your support, mga kameta. At the very least, subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my channel and support us. And call other people to watch us. Even if hindi kayo sangayon sa akin sa isang video, I'm sure you're gonna find another video. You will find it interesting. Even if hindi kayo agree sa akin, baka gusto niyo yung guest ko. Baka gusto niyo si OG Diaz. Baka gusto niyo si Ambassador Romualdez. Baka gusto niyo yung mga secretaries, mga officials, mga showbiz, mga tao na nakausap natin. So please continue to support us. And again, magpo-post tayo yung ating mga QR code dyan. Doon sa mga gustong sumuporta sa akin. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Very kind of you. I'm just saying, if you were able to do it once, you can do it again. But you need to believe in yourself and you need to optimize and capitalize on momentum. Very, very important. Inertia and momentum is everything in physics and in politics. Right? Ganun kasimple lang yan. Alright? Thank you very much mga kameta and talk to you soon.